Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sarah Commons Food Foundry Speaker Series. My name is Monty Nile, and tonight we are so excited to have Rachel Zemser of A la Carte Connections. She's here to help Sierra Commons, which is a business igniter and a rural business accelerator. And we work with food businesses, forest businesses, and Sierra Commons just provides a lot of support for folks in the counties in California. And I'm really excited to be representing the Food Accelerator here. And Rachel Zemser, before I turn this over to you, because I want you to introduce yourself as a food scientist, I am dying to know from a food scientist point of view. I have this can of Popeye spinach, and it says on it 1965. What
Okay.
what
Do-
the heck do you think's going on inside this can? And I should get it out of my house before it explodes? You can tell I love food history, and that was always a fun thing when I bought that. But what do you what the heck?
it's funny. I was actually um a consultant on a show that was on the History Channel a few years back. Actually didn't make the cut. They cut me out, the parts that I that they taped of me, giving food safety advice, but the show was a couple of characters who were eating very old food. And the show is still on the History Channel. There was a guy named Smokey something or other, and then there was another kind of like a character on the show, and they were eating old Pringles and old canned foods. And I think that the one of the concerns with old cans is what is the metal that is on the inside? Is it leaching any
Yeah,
metals or ions
yeah,
into the food? That
yeah,
would be the concern. And also, was it processed in a safe way? Like, did they actually retort the food properly to 250 degrees? Those would be the big question
yeah,
marks that I would have. And if I saw the can and if I kind of researched the history of the cannery where it was made, were
yeah,
they using modern practices? What was the
yeah,
material of the can?
yeah.
If we found all that out, then it might possibly be fine. Like if I were to eat a can of food that was canned in this day and age in a modern cannery facility, and I would have no problem eating it 100 years from now. But I'm
Yeah.
never quite sure about things that were made like
100 years
50 or
ago.
60 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. Well, with that in mind, why don't you before I know you have a wonderful deck that you've worked up, and I'm so excited about it. And then we'll have built-in Q&A sections maybe every 15 minutes or so. But before you share your deck, why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, your background, and I'm sure you'll have contact information in your deck. But tell us about you and your work and a la carte connections.
Okay. So I'm a food scientist, and I have always been a food scientist since the 90s. I have a BS and an MS in food science. I also studied culinary arts, and I have worked at a lot of large companies like Dan and Yogurt, Kraft Foods, Kagome, as well as some flavor companies. But I've been a consultant for the past, I think since 2011 or 12, I've been a consultant. I have my own consulting company, A la Carte Connections, and I help small startup companies bring their products to market. I work with large and small companies, probably more smaller companies because a lot of large companies really usually have their own internal R&D food science departments already.
Sure.
So,
Sorry, I
oh,
just said sure, and then there was a
oh,
ding when somebody entered the room. Can you hit the slideshow button so that the slide goes full screen?
yes, I think I can.
The upper right, or that's where I usually do it.
Let's see, slideshow.
Awesome.
There.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. So, so I mostly work with smaller companies because larger companies have usually have their own internal team. And so I wanted to talk to everyone today about the different stages that are involved in bringing food products to market. And these are pretty common stages. As I'm describing them are the same uh, stages that I think any person would follow who is a food scientist like me, who's helping entrepreneurs. They would recommend a similar path. Um, Excuse me. Maybe some people might switch some orders around, but I think this is really the ideal order. And I'm going to quickly go through the order, and then I'm going to dig into each stage is separately. So the first stage is, coming up with your idea, ideation, brainstorming, consumer insights. Stage two, and a lot of people disagree with me about this, but I feel pretty strongly about it, is finding your co-packer, finding your manufacturer. A lot of people feel like they need to create their prototype first and come up with their actual food product and then find a co-packer. But I always think it should be the reverse. I always think you need to find who's going to make your product and then make your prototype knowing who's going to actually manufacture it because the manufacturing is really a crucial part of how your product's going to look because you may find a co-packer that can only make a square cookie. So you're not going to spend months making a circle cookie if the only co-packers you can find can make square cookies. So that's just the basic idea behind finding your co-packer first. You don't have to seal the deal with them, but you should kind of know who's going to make it. Then you want to optimize your product. You want to do bacterial risk assessments, and we're going to do a deeper dive into food safety at stage five. You want to do test runs at the co-packer, shelf life studies, and then eventually a real production run. And this is now we're going to kind of go in deeper into each section. Um, so brainstorming, consumer insights, this is really the fun part. And this is for everyone who lives in the Bay Area. It's a lot of fun to do the brainstorming because we have so many great opportunities and places to get great ideas. We're at the cutting edge of culinary everything here. A lot of people come to me with their idea already, but sometimes they don't know what flavors or what nutrients or they just they're just looking for flavors or concepts. And some ways to do that, and these all sound very obvious, but it's just good to kind of remind ourselves of the ways that we can come up with ideas. You can visit local farmers markets. You can go to Whole Foods supermarkets. You can do a culinary tour of your own city. Go to I wrote Attend Fancy Food Show back when Fancy Food Show used to be in San Francisco. Now I think it's in San Diego or it's in Las Vegas, but
I
going to
think
any
it's coming back in 2027.
to San
It's
Francisco.
supposed to come back to Moscone in
Oh, I'm
2027.
so relieved. Maybe forever, or maybe just I know it was in San Diego this year, but that would be so great if it would come back to San Francisco. I really miss it being here. And when you go to local farmers markets, obviously they have produce. That's not really anything exciting, but there's always like the jam and the baked goods and the beef jerky and the kettle corn and all the cool vendors that we see. These are where the ideas come from. You see all the new exciting products. Going to Whole Foods, that's where you see all the new gluten-free things, the ethnic sauces, you see functional foods, you see all the protein bars. Just walking around Whole Foods is where you see lots of cutting edge new products. And when I say Whole Foods, Whole Foods, Sprouts, any overpriced supermarket will do. um, Going on culinary tours of your own city. I used to do that all the time. When I worked at a tomato sauce company, we would have restaurant chains come into town and they would, because we sold them tomato sauce, we had to put together culinary tours for them so they could figure out, what new ideas to put into their Pizza Huts and their Domino's and whoever we were selling to. And we would put together these really fun culinary tours and it's you have to really be organized about it. You plan ahead, you map out a plan, you hire a driver, you have like an official photographer and a note taker and all part of the brainstorming process. Going to trade shows, Fancy Food Expo West is coming up next month. IFT is a big ingredient show for food scientists like me. So going to as many trade shows, small, big, this is all how you get the ideas. Focus groups, whether they're big ones that you pay money for, or there's actually companies, Curion, I think is in the Bay Area, or informal focus groups like using SurveyMonkey, and having your family and friends taste products. this is all part of stage one. Just coming up with your ideas. I don't know how to go backwards when I have it in this big screen mode, but I meant to linger on that for one more second. But now we're over in stage two. So everybody understands stage one. I mean, it's not, rocket science, but it's really important when you're trying to find an idea to take advantage of wherever you live to come up with your ideas and really capture them in like an organized way and then trickle it down to come up with your final concept. Now, stage two, and again, like I really want to emphasize this, and many people come to me with ideas that they've been working on. They're like, "Oh, I've been working on this Fig Newton layered cookie concept for the past 2 years in my kitchen, and now I want to find a co-packer." And I feel like unless they are a food scientist themselves, or they have experience in developing food products, they've kind of wasted their time because they have no idea what they were doing. They didn't know how to formulate in a way that a co-packer could then take it off their hands and manufacture it. They were formulating blind. They were layering it maybe in a way that it could never be layered. They were just using ingredients from the supermarket. They were just kind of like making something that they thought was delicious, but that can never be duplicated. And at that point, I have to redo everything, or the food scientist has to redo everything, but not before we talk to the co-packer who says, hey, like, you need to make sure that your jam layer in the middle is incredibly dry. So you have to, you can't just use a jam that you homemade from the farmer's market. You need to source a jam from a supplier that makes jam that's designed for Fig Newtons. And your cookie layer has to have a water activity that's under 0.65, and it has to be a square shape, and the thickness has to be no more than X number of inches. And maybe, you want your product to be kosher, or you want it to be dairy free, or you want it to be allergen free. You need to make sure you find someone who can even do all these things for you. And then you need to kind of understand if you can even afford, maybe the co-packer is going to say, well, guess what? Like your first production run is going to cost you $500,000. And you talk to every co-packer across the United States, and that's like the lowest minimum order quantity. And you're like, wow, like I never thought it was going to be that expensive. And I just spent, $50,000 over the past 2 years, like perfecting this in my basement. So before you do any of that, first step first, make sure there's co-packers out there that can do what you want to do. And the only exception, maybe would be if you're doing something super simple, like a chocolate chip cookie, or maybe like, I mean, there's very few exceptions. I would say always try to find that co-packer first.
Well, let me just insert one thought as to small manufacturers that aren't yet ready to go to a co-packer and are going to be, maybe you're a restaurant and you want to scale up your hummus, but you want to understand the shelf life, or you're just a caterer and you want to scale up a sauce, or you're just small scale and you want to make it yourself in a shared kitchen. And if you can just weave in thoughts for those approaches throughout your presentation, we would appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go to a commercial kitchen, that's really a whole separate path that you're going to take. If you, this is finding a co-packer is for people who are ready to start producing, 50,000, 100,000 unit plus. When you're
Yeah.
going to a commercial kitchen, you may not be at that stage yet. And when you go to a commercial kitchen, you really can do whatever you want. You can make 10 packets of hummus, or you can make, 1,000 containers of hummus. But once you start getting into the 500,000, a million units of hummus, you're not going to be able to do it by yourself anymore. And at that point, um, you may already have your hummus in place already, but at that point, you really do need to start having, and I guess like when I say find a co-packer first, I'm really thinking along the lines of people who have never brought a product to market. Maybe they're not in a commercial kitchen at all. Maybe they have nothing.
Yeah.
They're just someone with a dream. Um, but of course, if you're already in a commercial kitchen and you're already mass producing, and you're like, hey, I can't handle this volume anymore. I'm ready to scale up to a co-packer. At least you can go to a co-packer and say, hey, like I'm already making this in a commercial kitchen. what am I going to have to change to work in your facility? And at that point, if you're making a fig Newton in a commercial kitchen and you're kind of rolling out the dough and then putting in your jam layer and cutting it and then selling it refrigerated, and you want to go shelf stable, you're going to have all kinds of things that you're going to have to change about your product. Or if you're making a refrigerated salsa, now you want to go shelf stable, your whole salsa is going to be changing at that point, and you might have to find a co-packer that's going to pasteurize and put it in a jar, and you might really want to find that co-packer first before you start kind of messing around in a commercial kitchen. It's just, I think what my main message here is that the process that the co-packer is going to follow is going to play a huge role in how your product's going to be. And understanding that process is just as important as what you're going to do in your own kitchen when you're formulating and creating. It's like a 50-50 thing. So you have to really know, you have to be like two steps ahead when you're beginning to figure out what you're going to bring to market. So so you're that person, you have a dream, you've got your Fig Newton idea. You've talked to like maybe three or four co-packers that make Fig Newton type products. And you're like, okay, I've got three or four co-packers. I understand how they're going to do it. Now I'm going to start making my prototypes because I have a good idea of how it's going to be manufactured down the road, enough for me to go back to my own commercial kitchen and create it myself in my kitchen or with my food scientist or on my own, depending on how independent you are in formulating. And at this point, you're going to need a prototype. You're going to need something to show investors. You're going to need something to show customers. You're going to need something to raise money from your family and friends. And when you are creating your prototype, it's really, really important to you want to keep it authentic. And like I mentioned, you want to make something that you are going to be able to later on have the co-packer make for you. So you want to make it on the bench top, but you want it to be something that when you show it to people down the road, it's not going to be that much different when the co-packer gets their hands on it. So anything anything, there's some things that you're going to be able to do at home, simple things like energy bars, trail mixes, but there might be certain products that you may have to really kind of work with that co-packer because they may have the equipment that you need to make these prototypes. Maybe you have to pasteurize it or you have to retort it. That's like a canned food that's retorted. You may have to spray dry things. Anything that involves like a high-tech process, you may have to, connect with that co-packer and they may have pilot equipment that you can use to make your prototypes. So stage four is typically, after you've kind of put together your concept, you have to kind of optimize it a bit. You may realize that the cranberries are too expensive. Maybe you might want to use raisins instead. You have to, source out all of your ingredients. Make sure that everything's affordable. You got to make sure that all of your certifications are in place, organic, kosher, halal, all of these decisions. And stage three and stage four all are sort of hand in hand, but in general, you need to, optimize all of your product decisions. So the next stage, and even though I'm kind of listing them like one by one, all of the prototype creation, you're sort of keeping all of these stages like in your head, like as you're formulating. As a food scientist, I'm always keeping them all in my head, but you need to really think about the bacterial potential bacterial issues that can affect your product. And I'm talking about bacterial risk as it affects mostly shelf stable products because as a food scientist, I'm usually dealing with packaged goods, shelf stable goods, beverages, crackers, cookies, um, canned foods, pasteurized foods, things like that. So, fresh food obviously, has a short shelf life, cheeses, fresh baked goods. So I'm not really talking about that, but more about shelf stable products. And they all have different spoilage and safety risks. And I wanted to, at stage 5, I told Manny that I would kind of divert a bit and dig a little bit more into safety and spoilage because he thought that the group here would be definitely interested in learning a little bit more about that, like going a little bit deeper into safety and spoilage. So, food safety versus food spoilage. It's really important to understand the difference. Food spoilage and food safety, they're two distinct separate concepts, and they're often confused or the words are used interchangeably. And it's important to understand the difference. Food spoilage affects the quality and palatability of food, while food safety focuses on preventing the consumption of contaminated food that could lead to illness. So food spoilage is usually related to like yeast and mold and things that can make the food go bad but not kill you. Food safety are things like salmonella, E. coli, the things that can kill you. So, um, so it's very important just to kind of always understand that there's a difference between the two.
Well, I'm asking the class to put questions in the Q&A, even in the chat for when we get a Q&A break. But let me just ask you right there. Chances are, if you leave food in your refrigerator, it'll grow mold. But you use the phrase kill you. It would probably be really hard to do anything at home that would lead to permanent illness or death, right? It would just taste gross or give you a stomach ache. Or is there something you could accidentally do in your home that could lead to worse repercussions?
I mean, I think that yeah, typically, with food, really food spoilage is the more common problem that we're going to encounter when it comes to just food going bad.
Right.
Food safety, there's very specific scenarios where food safety um, is going to be a concern. Specifically, food safety is really related, at the severe kind of like, oh, it's going to kill you level is really mostly revolves around things like botulism, um, things like eating, raw chicken and salmonella, undercooked. But when it comes to like shelf stable products, that people put on the market, like cookies and cakes and candy and uh, you know, usually food spoilage is really the bigger concern. The place where food safety is a really huge concern is really, the number one thing that I can think of is really when it comes to canned foods.
Right.
Canned foods are the entire food safety industry really kind of revolves around making sure that no one dies and gets botulism from canned foods. And our government has people in place to make sure that doesn't happen. It's not really up to us. Um, we are not responsible for making sure that botulism will never occur on the common man's watch. Um, if you wanted to make a canned food, there's people in charge at the manufacturing plants that are trained to make sure that no one gets botulism. And you really don't get any say in it at all. Like the government says we have to have those people monitoring the production of the canned tuna, the canned beans, the canned everything. So you don't hear about, when you hear about botulism in this country, it's usually from someone who did it, uh, someone who did it at a farmer's market, someone who's home canning and they don't know what they're doing and they're giving it to their friends. Um, Someone who's selling unauthorized carrot juice at the farmer's market and things that didn't get caught, like unauthorized food. But I would say typically food spoilage is really a bigger concern when it comes to, CPG, packaged goods, things that are, that that people are making and selling. So, but we'll talk about both, but that's a good question. It's kind of hard, eh, when you think about the kinds of products that are on the market, it's rare for food safety issues to become a concern. And when you think about like the recalls that we hear about, we're always hearing about recalls in the news, and you can just go to the
Yeah.
CDC website. When do we usually hear about the scary stuff? It's usually in things like cheese, like underpasteurized cheese. You hear about listeria and cheese and listeria. So, can you hear me now? As I feel like I'm seeing people move.
We can hear you.
All right. So yeah, sometimes when I turn off my video, that seems to help a little bit. So so what are the shelf-stable foods? These are things that the food scientists typically work on, products that don't really need to be refrigerated, products. I mean, we do work on frozen foods and, things that, frozen meals and things like that, but those are typically not products that have microbial concerns, because they're frozen. Um, but products, shelf stable products are the ones that we really need to think about the different kinds of bacteria that can grow because there's no refrigeration going on. It's just sitting there at room temperature. And this is where methods like canning, dehydration, vacuum sealing, pasteurization, acidification, baking, water activity, and so on. These are all the different methods that we use to make things shelf stable. Um, and just some examples include pasteurized bottled beverages, crackers, cakes and cookies, confections, salad dressings, high acid salad dressings, because actually salad dressings that are lower acid are usually sold in the refrigerated section,
Mm.
mayonnaises, nutritional bars, beef jerkies, the little fruit cups that are shelf stable. So these are all products that have been subject to a shelf-stable preservation process to ensure that their quality and they're safe at room temperature. And this is just a general, it's not just bacteria that that is a food safety hazard. We also have other food safety hazards that we always have to consider. There's the biological ones that we just talked about, the salmonella, the E. coli, the spoilage. But there's also chemicals that can end up in food, cleaning fluids and pesticides. There's allergens. That's huge. You always have to make sure that, allergens are properly labeled on your food labels. There's physical food safety hazards like metal and glass and things that fall into food. And this all kind of falls under like food production, following good manufacturing practices. So, and this is just like a little like I'm just digressing a bit at I think we were at stage 5, like food, understanding the food safety categories. And when you're assessing the food safety of your product, you may have multiple allergens in your food product, and you have to make sure that will your co-packer accept those allergens. You have to make sure that you properly label the allergens, like on the label. So these are all important. These are all important food safety considerations. The biggest cause of foodborne illness include and spoilage. I just listed them out. We got salmonella, E. coli, listeria. Listeria is pretty common in things like raw cheeses that are imported from France. You always hear about people getting listeria from raw cheese or from unpasteurized milk or milk that gets contaminated and then it's made into ice cream. You hear about a lot of ice cream plants that have listeria issues. Staph aureus, Clostridium perfringens, and yeast and mold. Those are the spoilage. And sometimes you hear about yeast and mold are mostly spoilage, but sometimes you hear about molds that are dangerous that produce mycotoxins. And how do we preserve food? These are some of the common methods that I mentioned a few minutes ago. We've got water activity. Water activity is basically, it's not so much how much water is in the product, but it's how much available water is in the product. So you can have a brownie that has a lot of water in it, you make your brownies, you add eggs, you add milk, but you could have a lot of sugar in that brownie, and that sugar binds up that liquid. So your water activity is very low. But if you were to make, say, like a sugar-free brownie, that water may not be bound up, and then your water activity is high. And that's why a regular high sugar brownie might not get moldy, but a brownie that is made without a lot of sugar might get moldy a lot faster. So, a lot of people come to me and they want to make things with very, very low sugar. And the first question I ask them is, what's your water activity? And we have to make sure that there's enough sugar or enough salt to bind up the water in their baked good to make sure that it's not going to get moldy over whatever time frame they want it to last for on the shelf. Adding acid plus pasteurization, that's a typical method for things like tomato sauce or acidic beverages to make it commercially sterile. Uh, and there's two different ways to sterilize something in a jar. If something is acidic, like a tomato sauce or canned fruit, acid plus heating to like 180 or 190 degrees Fahrenheit is enough to make it sterile. However, if you want to sterilize something that's not acidic, like beans or tuna fish, then you have to heat it to 250 degrees Fahrenheit because you don't have that acidity going on. And that is called the retort. And that's how you get your canned beans and your canned corn and your canned creamy sauces that are not sour. Those, they have to cook the heck out of it at a much higher temperature because they don't have the acid working in conjunction with the 180 to 190 Fahrenheit. There's also freeze drying, which is sort of like a very fancy way um, to dehydrate food. Well, you've all probably seen freeze dried fruits and vegetables at Trader Joe's, and and if you've ever bought um, sort of Kellogg's cereal that has like the beautiful kind of red strawberry pieces in it that are bright red. Those are
Sure.
not dehydrated strawberries, they're freeze-dried strawberries.
Right.
And they're very bright. And I'm going to turn on my camera for a second and let me see if I can actually, because I want to show you my freeze dryer if I can, because I have one here right here in the lab. I'm in my laboratory right now.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah, I've
cool.
got a little freeze dryer. You can actually buy, that's my freeze dryer right there. I'm very proud of it.
Nice.
That red thing.
Yeah. Beautiful. Speaking of preserving the color, that's a great color.
Yeah, you can get them in all colors. There's a company called Harvest Right. And I'm gonna turn it off because I don't want to freeze up on you again.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, you can buy a freeze dryer from Harvest Right if anyone wants to go down the freeze drying path. Uh, Unfortunately, to actually manufacture something that is freeze dried is very expensive. The companies that do freeze drying charge a fortune because it takes a ton of energy. Like every time I run my little red machine, I'm looking at like a massive electric bill because it's got a pump underneath there. And the pump basically it takes the food, my frozen food, and it takes that frozen water in the strawberries. And I do this in the summer. I go to the farmer's market when they're at the end of the shift, when they're trying to unload all the strawberries that no one bought. They're like strawberries, strawberries, strawberries for cheap. I scoop them all up,
Yeah.
freeze them, and then all the water is basically goes from frozen to gas. And the strawberries stay beautiful, red, and intact. And that's what they sell at Trader Joe's for a small fortune, but it costs a fortune to run the machine, but it is a method that is used for preservation. It's very different from dehydration. You can buy a dehydrator for $100 and your strawberries are going to come out all chewy and kind of, a dark red color. I mean, they're delicious. I mean, everybody
Yeah.
likes a dehydrated strawberry, but it's not the same as a freeze-dried strawberry, which is very, very
Right.
high end.
Right. It's fundamentally different. Hey, this is a lot of great information. Why don't we take a moment right now just to take some Q&A. I'm going to read you one of the questions and then I'll ask Anna to unmute herself and ask the other one. I know you're about to get into pH. Are you going to share us maybe a meter you recommend for small businesses making fresh sauces and salad dressing? Is there a pH meter or a method you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I won't recommend necessarily a pH meter, but I mean, there is a company that sells pH meters. They're called Hannah. That's my Hannah pH meter.
Cool.
And they have many, many, many kinds of pH meters. And they're very helpful. And depending on what you're measuring, they will help you pick the right kind. They've got very good customer service. I have I used to think that they had good prices, but then I felt like they got more expensive. And I don't know if it's tariffs or just things just got more expensive like over the last couple of years. But there's many kinds of pH meters. Don't just grab any random one off of the internet because you don't know where it came from. I would talk to Hannah. I think that their customer service is really good and they can help you pick the right kind. And if anything goes wrong, they have all the different kinds of probes and they'll help you pick the right kind for the food that you're testing. But they're not the only brand. I mean, there's several brands of pH meters out there. I like that brand.
How do you spell that? Hannah pH meter. Do you know?
Let me check here. Hannah, Hannah.
Cool.
And I have what's called the Edge, but I mean mine was a little see, but they have handheld units. So if you're just doing like a few pH readings here and there, but if you're doing like regular, like if you are manufacturing something and you're checking your pHs like constantly, then you might want to have a good durable pH meter. I do it for R&D. So I use my pH meter like every 6 months. So I didn't have to have like top of the line.
Yeah.
But you have to really kind of talk to the customers, to the salespeople there and tell them what you're doing, how often you're using it, what you're using it for, and they can kind of help you pick the best one for the job.
Sure.
Um,
Anna, do you want to unmute yourself and ask the second part? I think the second part. Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah. Anna, you're so quick. She's already entered the website for the Hannah company. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask the second part of your question? Because I think that's going to be applicable to several of the people here in the class.
Sure. Thank you, Rachel. Great tip on Hannah and having good customer service. I'll definitely give them a ring. My question is specific to a little business that we're starting that's launching with fresh sauces and salad dressings that we're making ourselves. I'm just wondering if there are any tried and true recommendations you'd give a business like us to maximize or extend shelf life. Refrigerated, frozen, but obviously one of those.
um, so are you pasteurizing it or you're just packing it fresh?
Packing it fresh.
Yeah, that's tricky because I mean, all of the ingredients that go into salsa will get moldy if you're not doing any kind of like, uh, are you just working with fresh tomatoes and you're just kind of crushing them up and
I said sauces, so herb-based sauces. Think chimichurris, zhug, things like pesto, things like that.
yeah, I mean, if you're not against adding some preservatives, that would help. That would help extend your refrigerated shelf life. A lot of people don't want to add preservatives because they feel like preservatives are bad. But at the end of the day, if you do add a little bit of preservative, then you will have a longer shelf life. And it will inhibit the growth of the yeast and the mold in your product. And there are a lot of natural preservatives out there. There's preservatives. That was actually the last bullet point on my list here, preservatives and microbial inhibitors.
Mhm.
There's a lot of natural preservatives. They're usually made from uh there's a company called Mazzoni, Mezzoni, Mazzoni Foods, but they're just one of many companies that sell cultured dextrose, basically fermented dextrose. And there's a lot of natural preservatives. Sometimes it can just be listed as natural flavor. Sometimes it can be listed as, they have creative ways of labeling these natural microbial inhibitors. Um, a lot of people feel like, oh, I'll just, add some vitamin C, some ascorbic acid, but that's not going to be enough because we all know that mold grows in acid. I mean, just, oranges get moldy because, mold has no problem growing in acid. So that's not really enough. So that's really, one recommendation is adding some microbial inhibitors. But, another way is really making sure that your environment is extremely sterile when you're making your product. And I'm not accusing you of running a dirty operation. I'm not implying that in any way, shape, or form. I have no idea like how you run the show. But um, you know, any step that is taken to reduce the initial microbial load will extend the shelf life. So, if your jars are super sterile and your lids are super sterile and you're like, boiling them or running them through a dishwasher or some sort of pre-pasteurization of the jars and you're hot filling them and you're then turning them over so they that hotness touches the lid and there's all these and I'm not really like a food safety expert so I'm not I'm kind of just giving some I don't want to say dime store advice but things that I have been told by other food safety experts there's little procedures and techniques that a food safety expert would be able to give you guidance on but there's little steps that you can take to lower the initial load. And the cleaner you are from the beginning, then that means that the less bacteria there is to start with, which means that there'll be less bacteria growing as time goes on, which could give you like an extra week. But really, adding a little bit of preservative, natural preservatives like this cultured dextrose could give you an extra couple of weeks, really, if you're not against it. But I know a lot of people are uncomfortable adding preservatives because they feel like it's a bad thing. But really it's really if you do the research it's really not necessarily something that's going to harm anybody or offend anybody necessarily and it could give you some extra shelf life.
Good information. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a company called Mazzoni. I forgot if it's Mezz or Mazz, but it's run by it's a company that is run by some Israeli people, I think in the East Bay. And and the guy is a scientist and he's really good at like explaining all the different microbial actions that he's got like a whole variety of products. So, and he really knows his stuff. So,
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I'll
yeah.
definitely look at them.
Thank you for that. I'll let you get back to your slides now.
All
Yeah,
right.
MEZZ, Mazzoni Foods. I'll put it in
Yeah.
the chat. Thank you.
Yeah, they're really nice. The people that work over there, they're very helpful. The CEO used to like, randomly text me and chat with me, but I think they've gotten so big, they have a lot of people that work there now. So this is just a picture of a water activity unit, and I talked about water activity earlier. It's the amount of available water. Moisture is the amount of total water, but water activity is the amount of available water. And this is an Aqualab unit. These units are really expensive. They're like $4,000 or $5,000. But you can, I have a water activity unit here. If you ever need to check a water activity, you can always bring it by my lab. I have a small mini machine that was a little bit less expensive, but they're still really expensive. Um, it's really good for things like beef jerky, dried fruits. It works in it works in products that water activity. There's products that we describe as being water activity controlled products. So beef jerky is a water activity controlled products. It works in products that don't need a lot of water to be palatable, like beef jerky, dried fruits, and so on. And a water activity controlled product usually needs to be under 0.65 in order to ensure that no yeast or mold will grow in it. And usually pH is not an issue in a water activity controlled product because there's no moisture for any bacteria to grow, so it doesn't really matter what the pH is. And water activity is reduced in three ways. You add sugar, you add salt, or you remove the water. Most nutrition bars actually rely on water activity to control bacteria growth because a lot of nutrition bars are not baked and they have no kill step. So, like these bars, that looks like an oven, but that's not an oven. That's actually just a machine that was like cutting up the bars. But these are just no bake nutrition bars. It looks like it's oats and raisins and probably some glucose syrup or something like that. And there could be like some bacteria in these bars because oats are not a sterile ingredient, but we don't want all that bacteria to grow and get moldy. But these bars have to have a low water activity. They have to be under 0.65. So that's water activity. Then I guess I'm digging a little bit into each preservation method. Acid plus pasteurization. Um, can make something commercially sterile, and this is a pH controlled product. Usually it's used to make beverages like sodas or tomato sauces, or if you wanted to make a shelf-stable salsa that is acidic. The equilibrium pH has to be below 4.6 um, for for it and for it to be allowed to be pasteurized at 185. And so a product that has a sub 4.6 pH that's heat treated at 185 is fine. And it won't get moldy if it's heat treated at 185 because that is enough to kill off all the bacteria. And the pH because it has a low pH, nothing will basically be able to grow after it's been pasteurized. So, but if it's not heat treated, if there's no heat treatment at all, and it has a sub pH a pH of 4.6, then it could get moldy. So, and it's interesting in California when you pasteurize anything you have to take a class. Well, actually, really, if you pasteurize anything in the entire United States, you have to take a class. You have to go to better processing. It's called a Better Processing Control School or something like that. And it's part of California regulations and it's part of federal regulations that you have to take this class in order to, um, to sell a product that is under pH control. So there's a lot of rules. I'm reading it to you now, but you can't just randomly go out and pasteurize something. Like you actually have to do it under state and
Okay.
federal regulations.
Well, that's interesting point because even cottage foods, homemakers can make legally at their home jams that are just fruit and sugar, but you can't do even one vegetable. So
No,
I guess fruit and sugar equal bound up water and very low chances as long as they follow canning processes. But man, you can't do that with pickles, or you can't even put a jalapeno in your jam. Suddenly,
no,
there's much
can't.
more, there's just much more risk, right?
Right. No jalapeno jams are allowed. That's like strictly against the rules. I
Yeah.
mean, you can't even, you could make, even if you were going to make a jam that had like 10% jalapeno puree in it, that is now officially under government regulation in the entire United States. It's under FDA regulation. So the government regulates all this, and if you go to the California Health Department website, um, I don't have the link on hand, but you basically there's a class that you can take at UC Davis, Better Processing Control School, and you have to like take that class. If you were going to do it by yourself in a commercial kitchen, you have to take the class. And if you go to a co-packer, there's going to be the people who are making your product at the co-packing facility, they've all taken the class. I've actually taken the class just because I wanted to take the class. I was working at a company and they wanted me to kind of be informed. But but yeah, it's something it's officially like it's a regulated food product. State and California actually has double regulations. I think in other states like in California and Oregon, and I think Washington and maybe like New York, everything is regulated at the state and the federal level. But then there's other states, like maybe like, I don't know, maybe more red states like Texas or states there's states that have like that are not quite as strict with their food regulations and they don't have as much state intervention. There it is regulated at the federal level, but maybe not as much at the state level. So like in California, if you were to make a pasteurized salsa that was under pH control, someone from the state of California is going to inspect it and make sure that everything was properly followed before it's released. But that's not necessarily going to be the case in Texas or Utah. Over there, you can just release it. However, if someone were to get sick or something was amiss, the FDA would be like, show us all your paperwork. And then you would be in trouble with the FDA or the USDA. But in California and in states that are more strict, like New York, California, um, Oregon for sure, Washington State, there's a few states where we basically have double regulation, and you really can't. We don't have the luxury of even like killing anyone by accident. Like that's just not going to happen. California will not let us kill anybody because we produce so much fruit and vegetable here that that they make sure that they got their nose in everything. So we can't even kill anyone by accident, even if you wanted to. But you really you can't. But people all the time like are trying to like can vegetables on their own and sell it at farmers markets, and they don't even know what they don't know. And it's very,
Yeah,
very dangerous.
yeah.
So, you know,
Well, I've got 20 more questions, but I'll let you get back to the to your nice slides, and then hopefully we'll have some time
yeah,
for
and we're
some
we're
questions.
almost done with the slides, and then we can ask lots of questions.
Oh, cool. Okay.
But yeah, I'm very, to be honest, like I'm not even a fan of anything cottage industry. I'm very anyone. I feel like ma food is like a weapon, and people who don't know food safety or food rules, they could really kill you if they don't know what they're doing. Even something simple as like selling nuts. If someone's growing nuts on a farm and they're just like packing it up and selling it to you, those nuts aren't pasteurized. They could have salmonella. In California, the law is that you have to like steam process all of your almonds. And who knows if someone's nuts have salmonella in it? Like it's very, very dangerous. Like food is just like a weapon of mass destruction if not handled properly. So I don't know. I get very nervous when I see cottage industry. I don't even think I'd even want to buy like a brownie from someone at a
Uh,
cottage industry. I
you're,
don't
you're
even
get-
want to take food from family and friends because I
yeah,
don't know if
you're
they're
getting
clean.
awfully close to home.
Yeah, it's very scary. People are just not properly trained, and I know too much. So, all right, stage six, test runs at a co-packer facility. This is you got your food, you got your prototype made, you've evaluated all the food safety stuff that we just talked about. You you found your co-packer, and now it's time to do a test run. Hopefully that co-packer will be able to do the smallest test run possible, but the goal of the test run is to make sure that the equipment is working properly. And ideally it's nice if that co-packer, when they do the test run, if you can get enough samples out of it for like shelf life, maybe to show investors, show family and friends, maybe like eat some, say, hey, look at me, I've got my new product on the market. But that's not always the case. Sometimes the test run really might just be like 50 pounds, and maybe they're just going to wrap it up in like plain silver foil, no label wrappers, and it's just to make sure that everything is working the way it's supposed to work. I on sometimes you're a co-packer, maybe you can't even find a co-packer to do a test run. And I did want to mention on my website, I do have a free download for universities that have pilot plant equipment. So if you can't find a co-packer that can do a small test, like maybe you want to do a small retort run or a small freeze dryer run or something like that, you can download a list of pilot plants that universities have, that I compiled a couple years ago. And I have to update it all the time because universities are always, changing the options that they have. But food science departments often have equipment that they rent out, or they have entrepreneur centers, or they have things that they can make available to entrepreneurs, like drying equipment or freeze dryers or retorts or whatever they have. I know Davis has stuff, San Luis Obispo's has things. You just have to call and like make arrangements and give them, money. And they usually can help you out. So, and then this is just, how to ensure that you have a successful test run. You know, at this point, you have a relationship with your co-packer and you're going to do a test run with them. Um, these are some really important steps. You want to have meetings with the key players at the co-packing facility before it begins. You want to make sure you double check all the formulas, make sure everything's accurate, make sure that all the ingredients have been ordered and they arrive long before production day, and that all those ingredients are double checked to make sure that it's the right ingredient. It's really because the last thing you want is to fly across the country to your co-packer only to realize that the wrong ingredients were ordered or the wrong ingredients were sent. So everything should be like double checked and confirmed before you go out there, just to make sure everything's arrived. I've had many a co-packer run where I was like, wait a minute, like why you were supposed to have whole milk powder? Why is only there non-fat dry milk powder? Mistakes happen all the time. All the paperwork needs to be received, specifications, nutritional, COAs, allergen, everything else that the co-packer required, everything has to be there. Um, when it's time for production, you want to have your notebook, if you're allowed, a camera. Sometimes the co-packers won't let you take pictures, other times they will. But ideally, you want to have, you want to have everything, there so you can take pictures of the product coming off the line. Um, so everything's like just ready to go. And if anything is amiss, you don't want it, you should be okay with saying stop. If your bars are coming off the line and they're like not forming properly, don't let it keep going. Say, hey, stop the line. This is not working. You don't want to run like 1,000 pounds of product and it's a big failure when maybe you have the opportunity to stop the run and fix the problem and go back and do it again. Sometimes people are scared. They're like, "Oh, like it's not coming out properly or the color is wrong." Like, they feel like it's too late, but bring it to the attention of someone right away and see if you can fix the issue because that's the test run. You're testing it out. You want to fix all the issues while you're there. Like, don't, this is your day. You could be paying $10,000 for this day, and you need to get the most out of it. And, at that point, when you have your product after the test run is done, if possible, if the product that has been made is representative of is representative of what your actual real product is and everything came out great, you might be able to use that product for shelf life. I actually just drove down to Santa Clara today and picked up 3 cases of frozen cookie dough pucks that I made with a client a few months ago. And I'm going to be sending out some of those frozen cookie dough pucks to a micro lab. I want to make sure that there's no pathogens in there because it's frozen cookie dough and it's made with raw ingredients. And I'm not really going to do a shelf life because it is a frozen product, but I do want to make sure that the bacteria counts are low. I'm actually, to be honest, I'm trying to figure out what kind of micro testing I want to do on this frozen cookie dough because this is a product that will be baked by the consumer, by the end user. So it is going to have what they call a kill step. And but people eat raw cookie dough, and that's what I'm concerned about. So I'm trying to think about how the consumer is going to potentially use this raw cookie dough. They might want to eat it. There's no raw egg in it, so I'm not concerned about raw egg, but there are some raw flours, and sometimes raw flours can have bacteria. I want to make sure there's no pathogens in it because my client's going to send it to investors. So, as far as Best By dates, I mean, I think that frozen product could really, if it's kept frozen properly, it could probably last forever, but I mean, it could also get freezer burn. I'm not really sure. This was just a test run. We had a successful test run and we did all the things that I talked about 2 slides back. We had conversations with the co-packer. We took notes, we took photos, we did everything. So I'm kind of coming out of my own recent test run, and we did everything by the book, and we everything was super successful. And now I'm kind of at this stage 7 shelf life. I it's a little tricky to determine a best buy for a frozen product because it's not really going to go bad. Oh, and that last step, I do actually want to make sure that the manufacturing plant itself was clean because if I send out this product to a testing lab and they find things like E. coli and salmonella, I'm going to wonder, was that co-packer's equipment dirty? And that could be like a big concern, especially if all the raw materials I know for a fact were clean. I mean, the first thing I would do is maybe check all the raw materials to make sure that those didn't have salmonella. And if they didn't, I may have to have a conversation with the co-packer. So after the test run is done, the next step is your real production run. Assuming your test run went well, now you're ready for your real production run. You have to make sure that there's actually stores that are ready to receive your product. You have to make sure that all the business details are taken care of. Your social media is in place. There's a place for the stores to receive there's there's space on the shelf for your products. All the payments have been made. None of this is part of the R&D process. This is just, the nitty-gritty details that I don't really know much about, but basically all the business details have to be ready. So because you're going to do your actual production run, and once the product's made, the clock is ticking. Um, so, once those crackers are made, even though they're shelf stable, they're still going to get stale. And that's the other part of shelf life that I didn't really talk about as much. Even if no bacteria grows, product gets old, it gets stale, it goes bad eventually. Not that it will kill you, but no one wants to eat rancid peanuts. No one wants to eat a stale, soft cookie or something is going to get, or a protein bar is going to get really hard in 6 months. So the clock really starts ticking the day after the production is made. Exception being like my frozen cookie dough pucks. Like they could be good for 2 years in the freezer. I really don't know. But that's kind of that's really the last stage. You do your real production run and you get them into the stores. And I always have to remind my clients like food is not like computer parts or other things that maybe other industries that they may have come from. Like when you make this food, like that's it. Like you really need to move it quick. It's nothing is going to last forever. Chocolate bars are not going to last forever. Um, things are just going to get old, and you got to move it fast. And then there's all these other things that you have to deal with that I know nothing of. Website creation, marketing plans, distribution, where and how to sell your product, fundraising. Those are all the non food parts. And there's lots of books on the internet. I just found a few random ones. That's mine in the middle. That's my ebook. But there's all these other books that you can buy on bringing products to market. So yeah, so that's everything.
Well, thank you, thank you. We're going to open it up for Q&A. If anybody has any questions, but I'm going to jump the gun here and ask you, and you don't have to give a lengthy answer. I'm just curious. When you buy like salsa at Trader Joe's, like not refrigerated, but the shelf stable, they're always really vinegary. And I figure, is the vinegar, is that like affecting the pH or the water activity? Because clearly they're putting it in there to give it a shelf stability that it wouldn't have without the vinegar. But you don't put vinegar in a fresh salsa. So do you think that that's more of a pH thing or it's a water activity? Or would you need to look at the specific product?
Sorry, my lights
Oh,
go off if I don't move
you
sometimes,
know,
so I had to get the lights to come back on again. Um, yeah, I mean, shelf stable sauces have to be under 4.6 for them to be sold for them to be pasteurized. And any sauce that's like a vinegar, like a dressing, like if it has oil and vinegar in it, they really can't pasteurize that even sometimes. Like a salad dressing really can't even be heated at all. So it has to be even more acidic. They have to get that pH to like the threes or the twos even. So with preservatives as well. So, I mean, in the world of like salad dressings, specifically, if you have a shelf-stable salad dressing, it's going to be extremely vinegary and extremely sour because that salad dressing was probably not thermally processed or heated at all. It's going to have a combination of preservatives, a ton of vinegar, and whatever ingredients it needed to give it flavor. But that's why shelf-stable salad dressings are just so they really don't taste all that great because they're just jacked up with all that acid. They have to have all that acid and they have to have preservatives. Otherwise, they're going to get moldy.
Or
But they
goulash.
never get moldy because they've got all that vinegar. They're so acidic and they always have preservatives in it. It's I mean I guess I have seen some shelf stable dressings that don't have preservatives, but they're extremely, extremely low pH. And I know that the manufacturers have to make sure that they use ingredients that come in that are already sterile to begin with, and they have an extremely sterile environment that they make it in. They have to take all kinds of precautions and they do all kinds of shelf life studies. So that's like that first category of shelf stable salad dressings. Um, and I saw that Anna was asking about sugar as well. I mean, sugar is a preservative, but it's not like you can just add a bit of sugar and that's going to like save you. Everything is, I mean, if you were to add enough sugar, so, there's not going to be enough sugar added for the sugar to be the preservative in itself. Really, it's going to be a combination of the pH and the sterile ingredients that are added when it's all combined together. And mixed together. But typically, I would say most salad dressings that are shelf stable have very low pH, lots and lots of vinegar, and they typically will have, if you look on the label, more often than not, you're going to see preservatives in it. When you were talking about the Trader Joe one, was that a salad dressing or was that like a salsa? I think you were
No,
saying.
it was more of a salsa, but I kind of want to move on for a second because I know we have limited time. It was more of a salsa, and it was
Right.
just vinegary. And I thought, well, they're doing this for some reason. But you mentioned
They may have just thought that it tasted good with all that vinegar, but but
there
when
were
they're
so many sauces that
pasteurizing
had
it,
vinegar. None of them tasted good with the vinegar. But anyway, I don't know.
but they do have to keep their pH not just under the 4.6, but well under because even if it drifts, like they probably have to keep it at, their co-packer probably said you need to keep that at 4.1, 3.9 because if they even drift, it's and I didn't actually go too into this, but it's not so much that it has to be under 4.6. It's actually the pH is based on a calculation that is done that is based on the time and the temperature that the product's going to be heated at. And the processing authority, which is like usually a 90-year-old man with 100 years of food microbiology experience, he will say, based on your time and temperature, your pH cannot go above 4.2. So
Yeah.
then the developers are like, shoot, like it better not even drift even slightly above because pH tends to drift. So then they'll automatically formulate it so it's like at 3.7 because we're so scared that if it drifts above, the inspector is going to come in and say, forget it. This $1 million worth of product that you just made, it's not going anywhere and you're going to have to throw it all away. So just to be on the extra safe side, we create like this buffer. So, and I've experienced that before. So it's not so much just keep it under 4.6. Like we have to stay within a super tight range that is dictated by the wizardly processing authority that has told us where it must be.
Well, you mentioned safe ingredients, and I don't know if anybody is going to be using garlic, but I know clients in the past that garlic has sets off all these bells and whistles. So is there something inherent about garlic that you have to be super careful of how you source it and use it?
Yeah, so the scary thing about garlic is is that you can't take just random fresh garlic and chop it up and put it in oil and leave it on the counter in a restaurant and use it because that's going to lead to like botulism because there are botulism spores that are in the garlic that when you add it to oil that creates an anaerobic condition and that can lead to botulism.
Oh,
So that's like the big scary garlic thing. Now in the food industry, when we use garlic and we're adding it to a dressing or a sauce or something like that, we will typically use garlic that is either pre-acidified. So we buy garlic that's already been soaked in acid by the manufacturer, so it's like already like acid doused. Or we'll use dehydrated garlic that's been dried, and we get like a documentation that says there's no bacteria in there. So we use garlic that's been and in the world of like salad dressings and salsas and things like that, like we'll probably use like a pre-acidified, garlic. And if we don't use a pre-acidified garlic, we'll take the garlic and we'll let it soak in acid before we put it into the dressing.
I had
This
no,
is,
I knew there was something about garlic, but wow, thank you for clarifying that. Does anybody else have any questions? Anyone in the fermented food research field or anybody else working on a project that they want to bring up while we have Rachel's attention?
I have a question.
Please.
Um, so I'm working on, well, I'm an herbalist, so I make fire cider, and fire cider is kind of vegetables soaked in apple cider vinegar. So it's like horseradish, onions, garlic, turmeric, ginger, um, and then there's some herbs in there like rosemary, lemons, and it's soaked for 4 weeks, and then it's strained, and then you add honey to it. And so I guess if I was to bring this to a larger market, as I'm really new to this kind of bit larger food industry, like, is this something that I need to be like watching the pH for? Is the garlic going to be an issue if it's then been strained out? Is these low, I know the vegetables are, because they're strained out, is that going to be problematic? And so I'm just been trying to figure out like, is this a low risk food or is this a high risk or I don't know, just trying to figure it out. I wanted to get your
well, I
opinion
mean,
on it.
if you were selling the chunks of vegetables that were infused with the vinegar, that would be somewhat of a concern because you would want to make sure that those vegetables were fully infused and saturated with the acid. But that's not the case. It sounds like you're adding the vegetables to the acid, but then you're taking the vegetables out. So, but
That's
you're
correct.
basically selling the vinegar that has been it had the vegetables hanging out there, but then you're taking the vegetables out. So your product is basically vinegar. So I think you're fine. I mean, you're basically selling vinegar that had some essence of vegetables in it. Like you're
Right.
straining
It's like an
everything out.
infused vinegar, flavored vinegar, if you will.
Right, exactly. So it would be a little bit
Hmm.
more of concern if there were large chunks of vegetables in your vinegar, but that is not the case.
No,
So yeah, so I think you're fine. Are you selling it in stores or are you making it like how are you is it on the market or like
not
is it
currently. I don't sell it in stores. I sell it to friends and families and local, just small things. I'm looking to get into a farmer's market, so I'm trying to figure out what the legalities to even get to there is. I think it needs to be made in a commercial kitchen, but then I just wasn't sure where that cross, like, like I said, oh, if I'm straining out the vinegar or if straining out the vegetables and then, but then if I'm adding honey, I don't know if that alters it. And I haven't really played with the pH too much. So yeah, just wanted to
I
get your
mean it
opinion.
sounds fine. I mean I think when you add the honey, you would want to check the pH. I think from a safety standpoint you're fine. You would want to check the final pH of your honey vinegar combination. Now I don't know from a spoilage standpoint if there would be any concern or not. It would really depend on what your final pH is. Um, that would be the question because I know that things can grow in vinegar. You've got mothers growing in vinegar, when you have like the natural vinegars and things like that. So I don't know. I mean, maybe when your product's all done, you could send it to a microbiology lab. There's a couple micro labs in the area. There's Amtech and Resco. Those are two local Bay Area food testing laboratories. And you could just give it in and say, is there anything growing in here? Like, is there any bacteria, pathogenic or anything? And they could do like a screen for you and just tell you if there's anything in there. But I mean, and you could check the pH too. It sounds like if it's like 90% vinegar, it's probably going to be like pH of like 2 or something really low, and you really shouldn't have anything to worry about. But and I think if you do sell it out of a commercial kitchen, the health inspector will probably take a look at it and tell you if it's okay as well.
Um, oh, I didn't even check that. Rachel, Anna, I'm hoping you're checking the spelling of those labs. Rachel, do you have those food testing labs listed on your website?
No, no. I think that I think it's spelled AEMT, Amtech Labs, and
Yeah,
then
I
and
didn't even.
Resco.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
yeah,
Yeah, and because the irony is somebody from the health department comes to check it, they don't have your food science background. So they see garlic and they don't think about the process or the pH. They just go, "Oh, this better be dehydrated garlic or we're not going to allow it." We're
yeah.
we're really rolled in on an hour and a half, and we really thank you for your extra time. I'm going to just throw out a final question with thoughts to you from you about fermented food, be it, sauerkraut, miso, kimchi. What approaches or suggestions would you have for anybody? Because I know that those are probably researched, regulated by different agencies. What any thoughts there?
I don't know much about the fermented food regulations. I really don't know much about it. I've never really explored it, to be honest. I mean, even when it comes to like the questions that Aline was asking me, like I have like a good, I'm not really like a food safety. There's people in the Bay Area that are more kind of food safety experts than me. I know a few. I have to think of their names, but like I kind of have like 75 to 80% of like food safety knowledge, where there's other people that are more like that's all they do, like all day long.
Sure.
So, I mean, I know enough for when I'm formulating like things to look out for, but I wouldn't necessarily uh when people want to hire me, I usually don't if someone tried to hire me to be like their food safety expert person, like I would usually say no, like I would refer them to
Yeah.
someone else because I'm not really like a food safe that's not like my people literally get like their PhDs in like food safety only. And although I did get a master's in food microbiology, so technically I could have gone down that path, but I didn't. But I know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to necessarily like be the best person for the job. But I know enough to kind of give general advice, but I want to refer other people to be hired for that. So, but as far as like, I don't know what the rules are as they relate to kimchi and other fermented foods. I don't think that cottage industry would allow it because they have to be
Absolutely.
refrigerated.
Oh no, yeah. It's even harder for like an artisan food maker that you can make hummus and salsa from a commercial kitchen or a restaurant, sell it at a farmer's market, but anything fermented, no, it goes to a higher level. So I appreciate you being honest about that. Listen, it's been an hour and a half. I want to really, really, really thank you for your time. We're super excited to have you here. And this overview for even for small food makers to see what the larger food makers, anyone growing into co-packing, we're going to explore discussing co-packing soon. But this is such a great overview. So I really thank you for your time. And I want to thank you and a la carte connections, right? That's the website.com.
Yes.
Yeah. So anybody can work with you directly.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, I typically my services are more like as a formulator, as a developer, as a creator, And I do know quite a bit about food safety as it applies to the products as I'm developing it. But there's definitely some food safety. Like if someone is creating something in a commercial kitchen and they want like a food safety expert to kind of give them like advice and guidance on how to make sure that they're not contaminating their product. There's people that like know the best safety practices and tips for things like that.
I appreciate that. And everyone here, thank you on behalf of the whole class. And yeah, have a great one, and I hope we can bring some business your way.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
Yep.
Very helpful.
Good luck, everyone.